Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks, the YouTube channel / podcast where I, your host, Carolyn Hines, speak to my guests about their films, the film industry, and what got them into filmmaking. And today I am joined by Marianne Farley to talk about her new short film, Frimas. I think I said that right. I know it's a French word, so I think I said it wrong.
Yeah, no, actually it's Frima. We don't pronounce the S in French, so it's Frima. But everyone says Frimas, so don't worry about it.
See,
No
French
worries.
was not my favorite subject. French is
No.
not me. So as Frima. So before we get into the film, I ask Marianne just to say a bit about herself and give a brief introduction to Frima, and then we'll get into the discussion. So Marianne.
Yes, well, I am an actress, director, producer from Montreal, Canada. I got into acting about 20 years ago and then became a producer, and directing has been I would say it's what I've been doing for the past 5 years full time, pretty much. I also produce some of my stuff. So I produce as well. And yeah, that's what else should I say about myself?
Okay.
Yeah. So Frima is a film I wrote a couple years ago, I would say in 2018 or 2019. It's a film that talks about abortion rights, which is a subject that is really important to me with everything that's going on in the United States right now when it comes to Roe v. Wade and how Roe v. Wade is threatened, literally. The timing of the film coming out right now is just crazy. So Frima is the story of a woman, Cara, who lives in a society where abortion has been recriminalized. And so she is forced to find an illegal, clinic to put an end to her pregnancy. And let's just say that things don't turn out quite the way she would have hoped. So yeah, basically that's the gist of it.
So you said something interesting, and I was gonna ask you about it actually. So this film, as we said, like the you said abortion has been recriminalized, which I thought was
Yeah.
interesting because the film is set in Montreal in Canada, and abortion is legal in Canada, and it's actually you can actually get it funded by through government healthcare. Though in some
Mm-hmm.
instances, if you go to private clinic, you would have to pay for some services. And I know there's a medical abortion retake medication where you have to pay for the
Yeah.
medicine for like basically a chemical abortion.
Yeah.
But abortion was illegal in Canada up until 1988. So it's interesting that you kind of took it back to where it becomes recriminalized again in Canada. So can you just talk about that decision to have that be a focal point of the film?
Well, exactly. As you said, when I realized, in my mind, abortion has always been legal in Canada, I mean, for my whole life. But when I did some research on it, I realized that, it was permitted for certain cases before 1988, but they actually decriminalized it completely in 1988, which is, not even 35 years ago. So that's not too long ago. My feeling is that we're living in a society that's more and more polarized. We're bringing these things back on the table. You know, it's really insane to me that, somehow we're questioning the legitimacy of these laws that protect women's rights, basically. So I thought about doing a film that was set in the 1960s or the 1970s, but the bottom line for me is these things happened and they could happen again, which was really the focal point of my film. And the message I wanted to get across is we're not safe. These laws are still threatened today in North America. Right now in Canada, we are safe. So from going back to the Middle Ages, as I would say, but who knows? Who knows down the line?
No, I agree because actually it's almost as if the more our world is progressing and the further we go into the future, some things are like we're regressing in some ways, and a lot of that
Yeah.
has to do with the bodily autonomy of women, like conservative. I think is like North America in particular is becoming extremely more conservative, more than I think a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
realize. And especially when it comes to things like racism, immigration,
Yeah.
and that we were talking about abortion rights, and they'd be like, "Oh, but like, we're such a progressive country." I'm like, "But are you though? Really?" Because like, if you look at how like First Nations people are treated, like they're
Yeah.
still struggling for equality on their own land, and like
Yeah.
we're in 2021, and they're still fighting for land rights. And in Canada, like women are still, when you go to work, like you still face discrimination in the workplace.
Hmm.
Immigrants are still discriminated against in Canada. Like you still have people, like you have people running conservative political platforms against immigration where they're basically stigmatizing
Yeah.
immigrants. So it's like Canada's progressive, but not as much as a lot of people like to think.
Yeah, I mean, in the United States, it's the same. There's be part of the population is progressive, and and that's what I mean when I say it's more and more polarized. Is the left is going further left, and the right is going further right, and we have to find some kind of middle ground, and we have to protect human rights. And for me, abortion rights is human rights. That's just the bottom line. Like we can't go back to a time where women can't make decisions for themselves. I think that opens the door to something really scary, and it's ludicrous and dangerous for women.
Oh, it is because like there's a saying: you take an inch, you give someone an inch, and they'll take a mile. Because like
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
abortion rights, that's like kind of like the starting point. And once they go there, there is nothing to stop them from taking away other things like forced
Yeah.
sterilization, and then force the women to stay home
Yeah.
again, making women work at home rather than letting them work in their own jobs and doing their own thing. So like it's like progressive while it's still
Mm-hmm.
regressive at the same way. And
Mm-hmm.
so like with the film, which is I think is very interesting, the film is very localized in the fact it takes place in just like three small locations. One is on the street where our main character, who is not named, which I think is interesting because it kind of, to me, I read it as like she could represent any woman. Like she
Yeah.
doesn't have to have any, because like she could represent millions of women in the same situation. And it takes place on the street where she's picked up. And the first question I want to ask you, so is the mural where she's standing in front of while she's waiting for
Yeah.
this truck to come and pick her up was very interesting to me. And I wanted to ask you about that because I'm like, maybe I'm like, because this is something I was saying about like, I mean, if I'm thinking too much, but like the mural is this gigantic, colorful mural of a man with his hand, and the where you place her exactly, it looks like he's picking her up. And then the truck drives and picks her up. So I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
about that because to me that kind of symbolized a lot of things with how men are kind of like picking at women, like politically and like sexually and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting that you point that out because we were looking for different locations to film in, and that we didn't get that painted, but it was actually there. And I was trying to find a location that would make sense, where it would be like a pickup location for, women who 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 want to get abortions. And it just and that shot where you see her and he's pointing at her, it came to me when we were shooting. I was like, this is just too perfect. And yes, it does symbolize men's control. I mean, when I say men, I don't mean all men. I mean the society that's very, paternalistic towards women. And also, this is where you're supposed to stand if you want us to help you. So there was something, it was like a lot of messages in that one mural, and it's still there. It's such a beautiful, beautiful, painting from a local artist.
No, it's beautiful, and it's interesting that it's also the most colorful aspect of the film because the
Yeah.
setting, the coloring for the film is kind of like drab and because it takes
Mm,
dead of Montreal winter, which I know personally is bitterly cold. So it's kind of interesting. You just have that one bright
yeah.
spark point in the film because like once she gets into the truck, it's all very tense and scary because she's in a meat truck, and this is basically a truck. It's a truck where it's on the road, and
Yeah.
the procedure is being done as the truck is moving. Like they can't stay in one location because it's dangerous,
Yeah.
and because it's in a truck, it kind of like takes you back to the time where I can't even say it takes you back because abortion is still illegal in many countries around the world, and
Yeah.
women are still, and even in countries where it's legal, it's only under certain restrictions where it's like for the health of the mother, the fetus is in danger, and or if it's like rape or incest or like those kind of situations, and that doesn't apply to every country because each country has their own stipulations for abortions.
Yeah.
And so like I know a lot of like especially in North America, women will say, oh, this would kind of remind you back when women were forced to have abortions in very dangerous situations, like probably at the back of someone's house,
Mm-hmm.
where an old woman or a nurse or a doctor would perform an illegal abortion. And then it was like, no, this is still very much real, happening all around the world. And
Yeah.
like even for like for instance, South Korea only decriminalized abortions in December,
Yeah.
but they haven't started. I don't think they've started working on doing social assistance to help women financially and and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally throughout the process of getting an abortion. But the point is it's decriminalized, but there's still so much steps that come after that. So you have countries like in Russia, like I think Russia is legal in Russia, which I think is one of the few countries apart from North America where there aren't any stipulations for
Yeah.
abortion. In other countries like in South America and the Middle East and other parts of Asia, like there's like all of these things that women have to go through. So can you just talk about like setting it in a truck, whereas why you picked a truck and not necessarily like you would say like a clinic or like a house where like it's one place where it would
Mm-hmm.
be easier for you to film. For one, like filming in the back of a truck cannot be easy. So I want to ask you about that decision.
Well, for me, it was like, as I said, in the 1960s, in the 1970s, and probably 1950s, the reality is women are going to get abortions. And this is what people don't understand is they're either going to die from it or they're going to have safe abortions. But women are going to get abortions. There's no way of stopping them, because sometimes it's your livelihood that's at stake. Sometimes it's your life. It's just, we can't be forced to carry out pregnancies that we that are just not meant. Anyways, that we don't want to carry out, basically, for whatever reason. So doing it in a truck was the idea of doing it in a truck was that because technology has evolved so much since the 1960s and 70s where it was illegal, the idea was it's way too easy to find people now. It would have been too easy for the authorities to find these places where they carry out abortions, right? So I just tried to think about how you could, come up with an abortion clinic, but an abortion clinic that would be mobile, that would be able to move around. So I guess, I don't know how it came about, the meat truck. I guess the metaphor, of women and just women being associated with being a piece of meat, being treated that way, was also kind of, it was a nice metaphor. Well, maybe nice is not the right word, but it was a poignant metaphor, I should say.
Yeah, because when I saw the meat truck, I'm like, okay, a truck makes sense. And I was expecting it to look like a small little medical clinic and said, I have like medical instruments lighting, a nice like medical table. No, like it had like, the slaughtered pigs hung up. And then the procedure takes place in a small little space in the back of the truck. And there's this, and like the imagery you choose is very interesting because like you have these carcasses and they're just hanging from the roof of the truck. And then as she's lying on the table, like there's images of like the hook, which the first thing that came to my mind is like, I know like back years ago, or I wouldn't even say years ago, like there are women, like the way how they used to do abortions, especially at home, they would take a hanger and turn it into a hook and try to abort the pregnancies themselves that way. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. And then there's like the blood, and then there's like clumps of meat, and like any woman who has had a period, any person who's had a period knows what those images look like. So I'm going to ask you about that because like they could be very jarring for some people, and I would think especially for men, because for women we'd be like, I know what that clump of flesh looks like, I know what that clump of blood looks like, but I can imagine there'd be some people like, this is too much.
I have to say, and when you write something and you bring it to life, you bring it to the screen, you sort of, I think at one point I stopped realizing how difficult this film was because I was so into it. But going to different festivals and watching it with people, I have to say that it happens pretty often that somebody, I wouldn't say faint, but Actually, I've had one person faint, which,
What?
yeah, but and mainly it's women who, have to leave because they feel uncomfortable for whatever reason. Maybe they've had an abortion recently and it's just like still a very sensitive subject. But I know it's a difficult film. And at the same time, that was the purpose, was to say, you know, abortion isn't glamorous. No woman gets an abortion because she doesn't want to use birth control. That's something I've heard, and I don't believe it. I've never met a woman who used abortions as a means of birth control. So it's difficult, and if you take those rights away from women, then you're putting them in physical danger, literally. So when you talk about the hanger, that's exactly what it means. The just women are, and women are still doing that in certain countries, using hangers and doing it on their own, which is really, really sad and terrifying for them and for society at large, for women, definitely.
Right, because the thing is, with films like this, like my friend Kate, who was supposed to join us, but she couldn't because of
Yeah.
emergency. She like one of the questions she wanted me to ask was she was saying someone watching me see the choice to lie about how far along you are as a danger that shouldn't be incurred. And she wanted to know what was important about including this risk because there's a scene where our lead character she lies about the pregnancy, about how far along she is in the
Mm,
pregnancy. And to me, I thought that was just how desperate she was
she
because
was.
it's dangerous. Like any woman who has first thing first, even if you've never been pregnant, just if you've had like a medical examination, any person who's had like some kind of like gynecological exam knows they are not pleasant. And no one, for whoever is watching this, thinks that a woman would ever get an abortion as a means of birth control. You have no idea what you're talking about because no
Yeah.
woman would subject themselves to something that is so personally and physically invasive as a gynecological exam and as an abortion as a
Yeah.
means of birth control. It is not happening. That's a myth. Please stop believing that.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just want to say that because like it's not real. Like no person would ever subject themselves to that kind of exam
Yeah.
for kicks. It's not pleasant at
I've
all.
heard it. I've heard it so many times, and every time I can't believe that people actually, um, think that women are using abortions as a means of birth control. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's emotionally, it's such a difficult procedure in so many ways, emotionally, physically. It's just, there's no way. And even if there is one woman on the planet who has done it, who has used it as a means of birth control, it shouldn't take away other women. And that's still her personal decision. You know what I mean? It's still her personal decision.
Yeah.
So and it's just the danger is that we're chipping away at these laws, and then you go back to, like, in certain areas it's like 24 weeks. You can get an abortion before 24 weeks, and then, oh, we'll take it down to like 18, and then 12, and then like first trimester, and the heartbeat law, which, I just want to say there is no heart at 6 weeks. It's just, that's like a marketing strategy from the anti-abortion groups. So yeah, so that's, I see that as something, really, this is the danger of chipping away at these laws, is that eventually women lose their rights completely.
Yeah.
And that's what these groups want to
Mhm.
happen. That's what they're working towards.
Right. And so for Kate's question, so she's asking about the moment where we realized that she's not 6 weeks pregnant, that she's actually 14 weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
so we wanted to ask you about that particular decision and about showing the kind of risks that women incur with abortions, because it's not simple. Like there's so many factors. Like for
Mm-hmm.
instance, this character, she's married and she's doing it because she reveals that the fetus is deformed and it will die the moment it's born, and she, one, doesn't want to go through that emotional pain of watching her child die in her arms, and two, her husband does not believe in abortions. Her husband, as the distinction was made, is not pro-life, he's anti-abortion. There's two different things.
Yeah.
And so can you just talk about that aspect?
Well, the reality is there are like a million, million. I mean, there are millions and millions of different stories when it comes to women who get abortions. So, I thought about doing the story of a young girl who gets raped, a woman who has a one night stand and can't afford to have a child, and then I was like, these stories we've kind of heard and we've kind of seen, and I wanted to have a different perspective on abortion rights because there are so many different situations, economical situations, social, and the thing is, if this woman, the backstory is this woman has just found out that the baby has, or the fetus I should say, is not going to survive, yet society tells her you have to carry the pregnancy, you have to keep you have to you have to keep this baby, even though you are going to get attached to it and then it is going to die in your arms. And which is a reality for many women around the world, and it's incredibly cruel. And I actually, I have a friend who went through the exact same thing, except she was able to get the proper care, and she was able to get the abortion in a safe way. So yeah, I think it's just I think it's cruel how we treat women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing with situations like this is, like, we're talking about these anti-abortion people, like, they always say that, oh, we're pro-life,
Yeah.
but they don't offer support for women if they carry the babies to term. They're not going to offer financial support. They're not going to offer babysitting services. They're not going to be like, oh, well, I'll help you look after this baby while you have to go to work to earn money. And then, because they'll be like, oh, but then you have a baby, you need to be staying home to look after this baby. Well, who's going to help them look after the baby? The
Yeah.
father wants nothing to do with the pregnancy, or it could have been a pregnancy through rape or incest, but they're not going to get the support from the person who impregnated them, and the person who impregnated them is a criminal. So then the woman shouldn't have to be around the person who forces pregnancy on her. And these people are like, oh, you're doing this, like you're killing a baby, you're killing a fetus, you're doing all of this.
Yeah.
And it's like, you people don't care about the women. You don't care about the babies either. It's about control. And I think that's what this
Yeah.
whole movement is about. It's about just thinking they have the right to tell women what they can and can't do with our bodies. And it's like, can't, because and even if you could, you're not going to be there to help us at the interim, and where we really.
Yeah. Well, the reality is, if you want less abortions on the planet, you give proper sex education to both young girls and young boys, and you make sure that all women have access to birth control, and you make sure that men are not allowed to rape women, because those are the situations that happen the most. But criminalizing abortion does not prevent abortion. It just doesn't. That's not going to happen, whether the law's there or not. It's not going to happen. It's going to make no difference. It's just going to put women's lives at risk. That's what it does.
Yeah, it's all about making things more difficult for women.
Yeah.
In every way possible. And so we're talking about women, and we talked earlier about a bit of the visual metaphors, like the mural and the meat.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the use of the term the water lily. So like that's the code they use to show that the woman is the right person to pick up. And I want to use that in because I did some research. I'm like, water lilies to me didn't seem so big. I was like, I know there's what you call the language of flowers, where every flower has a meaning. And for water lilies, it means femininity and purity and chastity. And so I wanted to ask you about use. I want to like, was that also intentional? Because if you're talking about, you're talking about women and women being forced to carry pregnancies that they don't want to carry, but that's a lot of these. We're talking about pro-life, also ties into the whole idea of a lot of these same people believe that impurity, and women sexually pure, and having sex only when they're married. But when women become pregnant out of marriage, they don't condemn the men. Again, it's the women that they go after. So I wanted to ask you about using that metaphor in the film as well.
It just came to me because I was like, it's a code name, right? So he says, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Or what did you have to eat this morning? So I was looking for something that was kind of off, but not completely. I didn't say like a hammer or a chair or something. So, and yes, definitely the water lily was a metaphor for, that purity and religion wanting to control women, and just the hypocrisy behind this whole pro-life movement or anti-abortion movement. I can't stand that expression. I can't. It makes me. It's such a crazy marketing strategy that unfortunately works to manipulate public opinion.
No, it's true, because the thing is and you know how, like we talked earlier, we talked about discrimination against immigrants and then, but the thing is you the way how so much of this is tied into to just conservatism, religious conservatism, and then how it plays into bigotry. And because the same pro-life people, again, a lot of them are racist, a lot of them are xenophobic. They're of course also against women's rights. And it's just, and a lot of it just boils down to, as you said, the perfect word is hypocrisy, because you're talking about pro-life, but you don't really care about the people who, if they don't look like you, they don't behave like you, they don't do what they want you to do, right? So they go after women because they don't want women to do what women want with their own bodies. They go after people of color because the people of color don't look like them, and they have bigotry towards people of color. And there's all of these things, and a lot of it will be tied under the same pro-life. They'll be like, oh, we believe in pro-life, but you don't believe in freedom of speech for everyone. You don't believe in in immigration policies for people to have like safe places to live, and for people of color to exist without being judged and marginalized.
No, I absolutely agree with you. For me, it really is hypocrisy at its at its worst. There's something about that whole thing where you say I'm pro-life, but yet your anti-social programs that, like you're forcing women to have kids that they sometimes won't be able to take care of. And the other thing is that you're also telling, the reality is this affects women of color more than white women. It affects women of, who are part of lower social economic classes. It does not affect rich white women. It doesn't, because if you want to get an abortion, you can fly out anywhere in the world and get an abortion. That's the reality. So it is hypocritical, because it doesn't mean that the anti-abortion people never get abortions. That's not true either. So you're just taking those rights away from people who actually need it the most. So it's not a pro-life movement. You're not pro-life of women. You're not actually pro-life of these children that are brought into the world, or forced to come into the world without parents who can take care of them, without having enough food on the table, without having proper shelter and love and care. That's not what being pro-life is at all.
And something else I want to talk about is, so like there's our lead character who's the person having the abortion, and then there's the woman who I'm not sure if she's a doctor or a nurse, who performs the abortion. So like usually when we do talk about abortions, we always talk about the perspective of the person getting the abortion. But then like this film kind of made me think about the person who has to perform the abortion. Like this is something, especially in the situation that you placed it in Frimas, where it's in a truck and she always has to be hidden. She's the person, like if they're caught, could be sent away to prison for 10 years to life, still be fine. And like her life is also in danger too. And then like there is also an emotional toll, because she has to be dealing with these women, and like she can't offer emotional support to them because they have a certain time limit that they have to do. And like they have like, like it's like 10 minutes, 20 minutes at the most, unless a complication happens where she has to be quick on her feet and she has to be precise and clinical. And so like she knows these women are suffering, but she's like, she can't offer any emotional support because the situation just doesn't allow for that. So can you just talk about that character and also that aspect of the film as well?
Well, I wanted her to be like somebody who's really like a militant when it comes to, abortion rights. But I also wanted her to have that background where she is really trying to help women, but also putting her life at risk. And you know how you go to the doctor sometimes and you feel like they don't have the compassion and empathy that they should have,
Yeah.
for maybe different reasons. But in her case, it's really because this is like a tough life to live, to have to do this work. And of course, these things happen where like women lie to her about how far their pregnancy is, how advanced it is, and she's the one who has to react to this, and she's the one who's putting her life in danger. So I didn't want her to be like this sweet, nice doctor. I wanted her to have an edge. I wanted her to be, angry and tired and just, overextended. But then again, at the end, there is that moment where they do connect and where you can see how compassionate she is and how, she really is doing this because she believes it's right. So yeah, it was, and at first I think at first the doctor was a man, and then I decided that I wanted this to be the story of two women from really different backgrounds and different, even generations, like coming together and having that tiny moment of compassion towards each other. Yeah. And, I think it was a really interesting character to cast as well.
No, they are. I want to talk about the two actresses before we wrap up. But one of the things that I really stood out to me is when our lead character, when she gets home, she runs into her husband. He's like, where were you? She's like, I was with my sisters, because she can't say what happened.
Yeah.
And she's in the bathroom, and she has to, like, she was given the I guess you would say, like, the placenta and like the what's the word I'm looking, tissue. I don't know, my brain is blanking on that word. But the tissue to dispose of. And the thing is that she flushes it down the toilet. And my first thing is like, why didn't you bury it? Right? To me, that would have been, because I'm still thinking in like an emotional aspect, like she would bury it. I kind of like, symbolic of like saying goodbye to this fetus. But then I was just thinking, Carolyn, that's also an emotional toll. That's something that would take an emotional toll on her, because a funeral, whether it's a small one like that, would still be something emotionally heavy for her to deal with, especially with the way with what the character is going through. And I'm like, again, that's something some people will look at and say that's a very bad thing for her to have done. And like, that's something like that women would have to be forced to go through, and we are forced to go through all around the world, because again, abortions are not legal everywhere. And while she's sitting on the toilet, the thing that occurred to me is that she's calling for her husband, and he doesn't answer. And I'm like, there's no one there to offer her any kind of support whatsoever. And that's also what happens with abortion when abortions are illegal. Like, these women have no emotional support system anywhere, because people literally legally can't afford to give them any emotional support, because they have to be worried about themselves, like with the doctor. And like, if you make when abortions are illegal, like, there's nothing there for these women. Like, these women are alone. They can't tell anyone that they've had an abortion, because there's the risk the person might expose them and turn them in. Like with Texas, like they had the whole placing bounty on women's head for, what was it? I think it was $10,000 bounty on women's head for having an abortion, which is absurd and inhumane and just like cruel. And like this, and our character is like, she's in a situation like that. If she was to tell, she can't tell a friend, because like, she doesn't know if the friend will turn her in, or she don't know if that would also put the friend
at risk.
At risk too. So just talk about that part as well.
Yeah, I just want to say the whole thing with the placenta and her putting it in the toilet is actually a way to protect herself legally, where she calls her husband to say, I just miscarried, because that's the reality is if you're pregnant, and in certain countries, you have to prove that you didn't get an abortion and that you miscarried. So how do you prove that? The only way to prove that is to, it's to show it. That's the only way you can prove it. So that's a way of protecting herself, and it's extremely cruel to ask these women to do it. And that's why she says, I can't do it. And the doctor says, yes, you can, you have to. But and you're absolutely right. The whole thing with her sitting, you know, on her, you know, sitting in the bathroom and calling her husband, and he's not responding, is she's alone. She's going to have to, you know, keep this to herself for the rest of her life. She will never be able to get closure. She'll never be able to get the emotional support that she needs. And this is what we're asking women to do all around the world in places where abortion is illegal. So, yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't thinking of her doing it to say that she had a miscarriage. I just it didn't occur to me that it didn't even occur to me that the husband even knew that she had a miscarriage, that she was pregnant. Sorry. So like you're saying that it makes perfect sense now. Okay.
Yeah. No, because in the beginning she says, I was told you were going to be able to tell me how to make it look like a miscarriage. And the doctor says, well, I'll explain the protocol later, blah, blah, blah. And then she gives her the bag, and we understand that that's what it is. And yeah, the husband does know, he does know about the pregnancy, and he probably doesn't know that the baby or the fetus has a malformation. That, you know, she probably kept that to herself because she knows his position is just, he's just completely anti-abortion. So there would be no discussion to have. So in a way, she's also protecting him from having to make that decision, which is what we do as women. We try to protect the people that we love. And, you know, in my mind, Cara could have been like anti-abortion herself before this happened, you know, because that's the reality, is when these things happen to you, sometimes your position changes. When it doesn't affect you, it's easy to say, well, no, women shouldn't have abortions, or, you know, who cares about people of color, or who cares about the indigenous rights, you know, indigenous people's rights. It's easy to say when you're like in a comfortable position, but when this stuff happens to you, when you have a child that, you know, got raped or is in that kind of situation, then that's like a wake-up call, hopefully. Or you just throw your
that's when
head
you're
in the sand.
Yeah, that's when you're living in your bubble of privilege. Like you never think it can happen to you, and so therefore you think you have the right to judge everyone else.
Exactly.
And so can we just can we talk about the two again, the two women? So I've been referring to her as the main character, but I think you just called her Cara. So that was the name you gave her.
Cara and Dr. Hubert,
Okay.
the second character. Yeah, well, you know, Carolyn Gontier-Einman, who plays Cara, is an incredible actress from Montreal. She's really talented. She came into the audition, she hadn't slept, she was shooting the night before, and she just blew it out of the park. She was amazing. And she had only done comedic work. This was like her first drama, but she just has, you know, a certain quality where she's like mesmerizing, and you just want to, you know, she's transparent. You can see her emotions really deeply. Like you feel close to her when she's and I also used lenses to so we could feel really close to her and feel her whole inner dilemma, and just like her pain and her fear and all of that. She just had everything that I was looking for for the character. And so she was cast first, and then we did auditions for Dr. Hubert, and Carolyn, the actress who plays Cara, was there I wanted to see, like, to test out chemistries with different actresses. So we did auditions, and Chantal, who plays Dr. Hubert, it was just magical. The two together was just incredible.
No, they were great. So I always I think it's something that people have said before, but like comedians are so good at doing dramatic roles. It's almost because they're able to do like the complete opposite of what their main skill is. And like she does fare so well.
Yeah.
And she does this is like it's a mix of fear and sadness, but also of anxiety, because there's moments like in the back of the truck where the cops turn up, like they're trapped in this very small space, and like you can just like feel the tension and the fear coming off of her. And it's two very different emotions. There's a fear and anxiety, and then there's almost this kind of like anger
Mm-hmm.
and frustration coming from Chantal. So it's like these two completely different emotional moments happening at the same time in this very small space. I can you just talk about that scene, because I just think it's very interesting where you have two characters in the same space in the same situation and they're giving off very different energies.
Well, yeah, I mean, Chantal, the doctor, in my mind would have been used to this. Not, I don't think you ever get used to that,
Mm,
because you can, I guess she's never got caught, but she could, and she knows
mm,
potentially that's there. But she's also in control, and she knows what the protocol is, what the steps are to protect her and the patient. So, I think for her, it just brings back all that rage of having to do this, having no choice but to do her job illegally, right? And just like risking her life for women's rights. And for Kara, she feels guilty for doing this. Obviously, she is scared that her husband will find out. She's scared that she will, go to jail. She's scared that she'll have to carry out the pregnancy. Like there's all these, and I wanted her to be vulnerable. So I wanted to show like what vulnerability looks like in that moment, and what um just that, you're right, fear and anger and determination, and just like, I'm in control,
mhm.
don't make a sound, it's going to be okay. Just like um her trying to protect Kara from herself,
Mhm.
basically, because she knows that if she starts crying, she is going to ruin everything.
Mm. Right. So just before we wrap up, so how has been the main reception of this film at festivals? Like you've talked a bit about women, the reaction of women from watching the film, but what has been the reaction of men watching who've seen the film that you know of anyway?
Mm-hmm. I think men like the film because it's action packed in a way. Like it's really stressful, and um, it's not like a soft, slow drama like the one I did before, Marguerite. I think I think the reaction has been good from men, but it's probably not as emotional as with women. I think for us, it really hits home,
Mhm.
whereas for men, it's out there somehow. Like they're safe from it, so it's not
Mhm.
as. I don't think it creates the same like inner turmoil for men as for women.
Yeah, for women, especially for us here in North America, and especially for anyone
Mm-hmm.
who's seen it in America and in Texas, and
Yeah,
like the possibility of this situation becoming reality is all too real and it feels almost way too imminent because we've
yeah,
seen what's happening in Texas in the courts and in other court cases because a lot of these things kind of like run concurrent to each other. There's Texas where they're challenging Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court. And then there's other trials, like what's going on with Ahmaud Arbery and the case with
yeah,
Kyle Rittenhouse, and you're seeing what is happening in these courtrooms. And then as a woman, you're thinking, how is this going to play out for women and for abortion rights, and not only for abortion rights, for other situations at time, because a lot of these things that we've mentioned before do kind of like all have like similar melting points where a lot of this can come down to like one group of people trying to determine the lives of everyone else.
yeah,
And for women, like watching a film like this is like this film as is very stark, it's very matter of fact. Like there's no big sweeping emotional musical scores, there's no soft lighting anywhere, like apart from the mural, it's like very
yeah,
dark and cold. And I appreciate that you do that because like you're trying to show the core reality of the situation.
yeah.
Like this is not a sunshine and rainbow situation, this is like a life and death situation in many different ways, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be difficult. It was kind of difficult for me to watch because I watched it like two times. And the first time I was just like, wow, this is not what I was expecting at all. And like my friend Kate, she said the same thing. She was like, this is not what I was expecting. And she lives in Texas, which is one of the
Yeah,
reasons I wanted her to be able to join us today. And but the thing is like this is a reality for many, many, many women. And there's some situations you can't just like try to make it soft. You just have to give point blank because you're showing how dire the situation is.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't want to sugarcoat it in any way. It's just it leaves deep scars in women taking these rights away. And you're right, it's going before the Supreme Court. I think it's Mississippi's going in front of the Supreme Court December 1st to try and overturn Roe v. Wade, which unfortunately, I don't have much hope of it not happening. It's been in the works for a long time. There's been an agenda to overturn Roe v. Wade for a long time, and I think we're just seeing. I think we're still going to have to keep fighting for a while. But I want people to stand up and say this is not what I want, because it's not the majority of people who are anti-abortion. The majority of people are pro-abortion or pro-choice.
Yeah, it's just the people that are anti-abortion or anti-choice are the ones with the unfortunately seem to have the most power behind them.
Yeah, and they talk loud. You know what I mean? Like they're out there, and they talk about it a lot. And I think we take these rights for granted, and I think that's really the bottom line of my film. That's the message I wanted to send, is we should never take this for granted. It keeps, we keep putting it back on the table, and we have to stop, as I said, we have to stop questioning the legitimacy of these laws that protect women's rights.
Again, so thank you so much, Marianne, for talking with me about your film. I think it's uncannily and scarily timely for what's going on in North America and around the world. Is there anything else that you would like to say about either Frimas or any other films or any projects that you're working on before we wrap up?
Well, I want to say, I was really fortunate to have Uzo Aduba and Dan De Nicola come on as executive producers. I want to thank them. They're amazing. They really feel strongly about the message that the film is bringing out. I have a feature film called North of Albany that's going to come out in 2022, and a whole bunch of other projects in the works. So can't wait to discuss those too.
And just for a minute, so how did you get Aduba to become your executive producer?
Well, we sent her the film. I already knew Uzo, and we're in the same agency, and we've become friends. And we sent her the film, and she sent it to her business partner, Dan De Nicola. And they were both blown away. They really wanted to support the film. So
okay, great. That's great, because I'm a fan of Uzo. So
she's incredible. I love her so much. She's incredible. Yeah, she's such a sweet, kind woman, and so talented. Yeah, again, brilliant.
She is. Again, congratulations for the film, and I hope you get success off of this, because I think it's very important that more people get to see it, and that we have these kind of conversations about it, because like we as women, we know, but I think women should be given every opportunity to talk about these kind of situations and how they affect us. Excuse me, because like when things happen, no one can ever use the excuse like, oh, I didn't know, I didn't understand. But like, no, you can't, because you've been told, it's been explained to you multiple times, and in very different ways.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
So so thank you so much for talking.
Thank you. It was amazing. Thank you. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I guess we'll wrap up here. And this was an amazing conversation, and I just hope that when I watched the film, as I said, because I watched it twice, and the first time I was just like, I was uneasy, but then the second time I was just like, you know what, I appreciate this. I always appreciate films, but like I appreciate this kind of stories, because like these are things that like I just feel very deeply about, and it's something that I talk about often. And like because of my own personal health issues and stuff, it's just like like when this happened, it was just like happened at the right time. But again, thank you so much for me. So we wrap up here, and that is it.